We really wanted to bring the community a brief session on some ways that you can help minimize the impact or effect of seasonal allergies. Being that we live in the state of Arizona, at least most of us, there might be some folks that are joining us today from other areas. But one of the wonderful things about Arizona is that there are things blooming here year round. And that's wonderful, but not necessarily for those who have various seasonal or pollen or other environmental allergies. So we just thought this would be a really helpful thing. Personally, I am someone that has had a challenge with that my entire life. Been a severe asthmatic, allergic to many things, and actually one of the other things I've done throughout my life, I used to be an educator for something called Champ Camp and Camp Super Kids, which was a camp geared towards children with cystic fibrosis, severe asthma, and allergies, because it can be very hard to send a kid with those kind of conditions to a regular summer camp. So I used to do some educating on that for kids and for parents. So one of the big reasons that we wanted to share that with you today. Anyways, moving forward, let's take a quick look at some of the major issues that might plague us here, more so in Arizona than in some other places. One of the big ones is dust. So anyone that's lived in the Phoenix area or in the valley for any length of time has probably seen one of these dust storms, also known as a haboob. I don't know where they got that name from. But anyway, when the winds pick up and these dust storms just roll across the valley, even when that's not happening, Arizona is a very dusty state. And I'm sure many people can attest that no matter what you do, it seems like most of the time that dust and other things can find their way into your house. I literally am dusting with wet cleaning supplies almost on a daily basis. But especially for people who have any kind of allergies or asthma, we tend to have a little bit more sensitive immune system. And so dust and air pollution can be particularly problematic and can exacerbate symptoms that are already happening. So that is something to be aware of, but also that dust mites are actually a major allergy. So being we've got a lot of dust, that can be an issue for people as well. So some of the major pollen producers in our state, there's different things at different seasons. And we'll get into in a little bit here why it actually can be very important to know which pollens you're actually allergic to, because a lot of folks, don't necessarily know. I mean, if you've got a seasonal allergy and you just notice certain times of the year that you're sneezing more, you're itching, you get watery eyes, and you can kind of tell it's an allergy, a lot of people just take something over the counter, to try to help with that. And if those are not life-threatening, there's maybe not always a need to go to an allergist, but it can be really helpful to do that. And what they're going to do is a skin scratch test. So all they do is take a little bit of the most common pollens and other allergens. They'll usually test for things like pet dander, believe it or not, cockroaches, dust mites, common things in our environment. And they mark out some numbers on your back. They give you a little bit of that allergen just underneath the skin, and then they wait to see what the reaction might be. And of course, you stay in the office should there be any kind of a reaction that might be, life-threatening or something like that. So it's under, of course, medical supervision, and then they can let you know exactly what things you react to, which in a lot of cases can make it easier to avoid. So some of the major ones around here, in the winter, we've got our juniper trees, mountain cedar, which is another word for a pine tree, and hickory trees. Everyone who's lived around Arizona knows about mesquite trees. They smell wonderful, but they drop those pods on the ground. They can clog up all sorts of things, and dogs love to eat those things, which can be another issue. But of course, again, pine trees, palo verde trees, oak and olive trees are actually a really big issue for a lot of people. In fact, so many people are now known to have allergies to olive trees that they are no longer allowed to be planted as young seedlings in the state of Arizona. There are a lot of them that are old and are sort of, I guess I would say, grandfathered in. But a lot of people are having these trees removed because the pollen is so problematic for people. And of course, grasses, There's some grasses that are native to Arizona, not too many, but with the introduction of things like golf courses and people trying to have yards in the desert. Not saying there's anything wrong with that, but we've got grasses that are actually not necessarily native to the area that have brought other allergens in. The absolute biggest one, though, is ragweed, and that is really across the country. Ragweed, it's very easily recognizable by these yellow flowers, and it's a small plant, not like a big tree or anything, but it causes trouble for a lot of people. So what are some things you can do? Of course, again, I always recommend going to the doctor, getting things checked out. But even the greatest allergy medicines, there's still things that we can do that are not pharmaceutical that can really help to minimize symptoms. And if the allergies aren't severe, that could go a long way. So one of the major things, as I already mentioned, people that have regular allergies, and asthma and things like that are a little bit more sensitive anyway. So something you can really do is limit outdoor activity when the air quality is poor and where the pollen counts are high. So these are live links to one of our local news stations here in the Phoenix metro area that will let you know what those pollution levels are and also which pollens are high at different times of the year and even different times of day when they're supposed to be the highest. So if you're someone that loves being outside like I do, I want to be outside as much as I can, but I do try to avoid those peak pollen times when I'm really having an issue, because otherwise I'll end up needing my inhaler the whole time, my eyes are watering, I break out in hives, and it's just a little bit miserable. So we can definitely check on those things and try to gear our outdoor activity towards when those will be at the lowest rate, hopefully. So what are some other things that we can do to really help? One of the first things, and my allergist recommended this to me, is a nasal saline irrigation. And it sounds gross, but it really works pretty well. I mean, when we start sneezing and when we start coughing, basically what our body is doing, it's producing mucus to try to get rid of that foreign invader that is causing problems. So it's our body's defense mechanism. Doing those nasal irrigations can really help get some of that stuff out and can help ease those symptoms. So it can also help wash out bacteria. So that could actually help reduce the chances of you getting a cold. Gargling with salt water is another great thing you can do, because one of the symptoms of allergies as well is, again, that throat congestion. When we're inhaling pollen, our body's natural defense is, again, to make that mucus, trying to get it out of our system to minimize the impact of the reaction. So that can be super helpful. Another major issue is air filters. And you want to get a really good one. So the high efficiency particulate air filters, basically it just forces the air through really fine mesh that traps harmful particles. We literally change ours sometimes every 2 weeks, especially during certain seasons. Like right now, the citrus tree blossoms are kicking my butt. So we've been a lot more conscientious about that, and it is really helpful. Cleaning, as I already mentioned, I wipe things down all the time. Sweeping is great, just wiping things down dry, certainly, but sometimes doing that actually just sort of sends more things into the air. As you're sweeping, it can kick up dust. So like one of those little Swiffer mops or something like that that's really trapping the particles can be a little bit more helpful. If you do have carpeting, emptying the vacuum bag, but if you're the one with allergies, I'd nominate someone else to do that, because that's a hot mess. But that can be very helpful. But honestly, one of the major considerations that I personally would recommend that has been very helpful throughout my life is minimizing or getting rid of carpet, and for kids, stuffed animals. I'm very allergic to dust mites, so as a kid, we had all hardwood floors. We had central air purifiers everywhere, and I did not have stuffed animals in my bedroom where I slept because that was a major issue with regards to dust mites. Because think about how much stuff can get trapped in carpet, in linen, that's really hard to see. So that can, again, be something that's really helpful. And then probiotics. I would approach that with a little bit of caution if that's not something that you've done before, because there's an adjustment period, but a major portion of our immune system is actually produced through the good gut bacteria that we have. For people that are not allergic to dairy products, just eating yogurt every once in a while can actually provide almost all that you need. But I would also just, again, double check with a doctor about that. But it really can help to improve the immune system response that our bodies are having to hopefully help minimize some of the reactions. And then vitamin C, I mean, that's kind of a catch-all. Obviously, it is an immune system support nutrient, but it's also a natural antihistamine. So those histamines, that's basically what our bodies are releasing when those foreign invaders come in through our nose or our mouth or whatever. And so vitamin C can help with that. Something else that can help too is omega 3s. We'll get to that actually on the next slide. Those are natural anti-inflammatory. Most people are usually getting almost all the vitamin C they need, but taking a little bit extra usually isn't going to hurt anyone. It's a water-soluble vitamin, so if you are taking more than your body needs, most of the time your body is just going to pee it out. Keeping breezes out. And again, I don't know about everyone listening, but I love having our screens open, the windows open, and all that sort of thing. But during the times of year when the plants that I'm allergic to are producing all their pollen, I can't do that. One of my worst allergies, many of you know I lived in Flagstaff for many years, is the pine tree pollen. And the time of year when the pine trees would explode and that yellow dust was everywhere, it was so hard to keep it out of the house, but I was miserable if I couldn't keep it out of the house. And I don't like taking a lot of medication if I don't have to. I always felt drowsy and things like that. So anything we can do to minimize using those air filters, but also a quick little trick that I actually learned this one on Pinterest is to try covering up vents with multiple layers of cheesecloth, which can help to catch some of the bigger particles. And I'm amazed at how much that actually filters out. So that's a cheap thing that you can do. Even putting it, over screens, so you still get a little bit of fresh air sometimes, but not as much is coming in. And then washing up, and that's a major one. I can't tell you how often, I'll be outside and I just start itching like crazy and you don't even see anything. So if you come in from outdoors, it's a great idea if you rinse off really quick, if you don't have time to take a full shower, even using like a damp washcloth just to wipe down, your face, splash your face off, maybe wipe your arms down. But if you've been outside in the environment where things are really floating around out there, I actually really recommend doing a change of clothes. Growing up, I was actually very violently allergic to horses and hay. And my grandfather had horses and lots of hay. And the poor guy, he used to have to keep a clean set of clothes at my parents' house. If he wanted to come visit, he'd have to take off what he was wearing and put on a fresh set of clothes. It really can be that much of an issue for people that are really, really allergic. So washing things as much as you can, it sounds like a lot of work, but it makes a huge difference. And I would say sheets too. That's another big one, is washing the pillows and sheets pretty regularly. Like once a week is pretty good for that. But also, leaving shoes outside can be really helpful, or in a mud room, because they can track in a lot of stuff. So also pets. Dogs and cats are a big allergy. Pet dander is something that does bother a lot of people, but if you're not allergic to your pets, but you are allergic to pollen or dust mites or some of those other things, keep in mind that whenever your pets go outside, they're getting all that stuff on their fur. They're rolling around in things and they're bringing it in your house. So, if you have a doggy door, hopefully they're maybe going into a mud room or something. One thing that we do is we keep damp towels in like a little bucket by the door, so that when they come in, they just get a quick wipe down with the towel. And boy, do they love the towel. So it's kind of a win-win. But we wipe their paws off, we wipe them off, and they get full baths every couple days, which is very, very helpful. Because otherwise, everybody knows when your dog comes in, what's the first thing they do? They shake off. And if they're covered with pollen or things that you're allergic to, all that stuff is now all over the place in your house. A few other things that I wanted to mention. For some people, wearing a mask can be very helpful. I do think that's really a personal preference. If you are going to try wearing a mask outside, especially when pollution is high, things like that, The best thing is to make sure that it's an N95 with a good face seal. Because if it's one of the not surgical, the blue ones that they have in like every medical office now, if they've got those gaps by the side of your mouth or by your nose, what I've personally found is that you actually still get the pollen and stuff inside the mask, and now it's just trapped closer to your face. So if the mask does not have a good seal, that's going to be a challenge for some people. And severe asthmatics may also have an issue just breathing in a more constricted airway. And that's definitely something that I've found. So personally, I find it better not to use one, but I know lots of folks that do use it and they feel like it helps. So I think that's a personal preference. Of course, eating healthy can be great, but we also want to be careful about certain fruits and vegetables. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But eating safe fruits and vegetables can very much help our immune system and reduce inflammation. Vitamin C is known as an antioxidant. And what that does is it protects cell walls. So if you think about, actually, if you cut you cut an apple open, if you want to keep it from getting brown, you put a little lemon juice on it. Basically what just happened is we put that antioxidant, we're protecting the cells on the cell walls of that apple from the effects of the oxygen around it and from cell damage. And as I already mentioned, omega-3s, one of the best places to get that is fish oil, provided you're not allergic to fish. Staying hydrated is super, super important as well. Because if you're dehydrated, that mucus is going to be thicker, it's harder to get out. So that's a major consideration. Breathing in steam can be helpful to loosen things up using a humidifier. But if you're someone who's allergic to mold, you want to be a little bit cautious with that, because having steam running in your house all the time can also cause the formation of mold spores. That's not something we worry about too much here in Arizona for the most part, except maybe during monsoon season. But anyone out there who's from the East Coast or a more humid environment knows that when the humidity is up, mold can start to develop, inside the house and things like that. So that can be problematic as well. Some folks were asking me before we get into their pollen food cross reactions about things like essential oils and stuff like that. I do know some people that enjoy that sort of thing. The issue can be that people who have allergies to things in the environment as well also tend to be very sensitive to some of the smells in those things. So for example, if you give me anything that's scented like lavender or has a floral scent to it, I'm going to stuff up right away and start wheezing. So I really don't even want to talk too much about that, except to say be cautious. I personally have a really hard time tolerating any floral scented lotion, perfume, anything like that. It sets me off right away. So I think that needs to be a very individualized thing and approach with extreme caution. And of course, I'd always want to check with a doctor. All right, so as I mentioned when we first started, I am literally someone who has struggled with allergies my entire life. And I want to say I was in my early 30s before I came to learn about something called oral allergy syndrome. I always assumed, I was allergic to so many things as a kid, that I was just allergic to watermelon and oranges and stuff like that. Although I never tested allergic for them, because if I'd eat something like that, especially in the summer, I would get a crazy rash all over my mouth, my lips would swell up, and my throat would start itching, and it would just kick off all these allergic symptoms. Well, basically what's happening is a lot of the pollens that we're allergic to share similar proteins to some of these fresh fruits and vegetables. So eating them can cause a very similar reaction and set off those miserable allergies. Most of those are not life-threatening, but that's something to check with your doctor about. Usually once the food is past your mouth and it's in your digestive system, your digestive enzymes denature those fragile proteins enough that they shouldn't cause too much more issue, but they could cause some nausea, some stomach upset, gastric upset, and things like that. So something to be very aware of, and that's where we're going to get into why it's important to know what pollens you're actually allergic to. So birch pollen, not super common here in Arizona, but that's an awfully long list of foods. You're going to notice multiple things, though, that are going to repeat. Apples are very common, kiwis are common, strawberries are common. But one of the things that is pretty much universal is that the problem only seems to exist, number one, when these pollens are being produced in the environment, and number two, when the food is raw. So if a raw apple produces that kind of symptom in your mouth, applesauce probably would not do the same thing. So cooking it can usually denature those proteins so that your body doesn't react to them. But being aware of that is important. It's hard to cook a watermelon. So that would be something to avoid if those pollens are going to be an issue for you. Cedar pollen, and that's super common around here. I can tell you, anytime I eat a fresh tomato, I can't get near a kiwi. But a fresh tomato, my lips will swell up, everything will start itching, especially around the corners of my mouth. But I can have tomato sauce. I'm not theoretically allergic to a tomato, but whatever's in there is still going to produce some itching and uncomfortable symptoms. So here's something we want to be aware of going into summer barbecue season. People like to cook things over mesquite or over hickory or over cedar because it smells wonderful and it gives a really great flavor. But if you're allergic to mesquite or hickory or cedar, that pollen is in the wood. And once the pollen is in the smoke in the air and you start breathing it in, that can either set off an asthma attack or it can create some of those same symptoms. So being aware of that is really important, before you're going to a barbecue, if that is one of your allergies. That's just something to be aware of. And I wasn't aware of that for many, many years as well. But I can tell you there are certain things that we've learned the hard way that my husband likes to eat that I'm allergic to. You wouldn't think would be an issue if I'm not touching it. But if he puts it in a frying pan and that allergen gets from the frying pan into the steam in the air, I am looking for an inhaler really fast. So definitely something to be aware of that I think a lot of folks don't know. Ragweed. So here's our big one. We talked about ragweed is everywhere. I think it's in every state in the United States. So being aware that when it is ragweed season, all of these raw fruits and vegetables are going to cause problems. Bananas. We also talked about how tea can be helpful because of the steam. But notice, a lot of people take echinacea for it's reported to have some immune system properties. I don't think that's proven, but people do like to take that. Chamomile tea is often used to help relax at night, but those can actually really set off some of your allergy symptoms. They're probably not going, again, to be a systemic, dangerous, life-threatening reaction, but they might make your life miserable. So again, something to be aware of. Grass, a lot of grass. We already talked about that. Notice there's a recurring theme. Melons show up a lot. Citrus shows up a lot. Tomatoes show up a lot. So there's many repeating things. Nuts do also show up. For a lot of people that they're not allergic to nuts, but they might have some of those allergies to some of those pollens that could cross-react, like having nut butter. So a roasted nut turned into nut butter is probably not going to produce the same effect as the nut in its raw form. So that's really important to recognize as well. So just some more examples here, some things for us to be aware of. And something else too, latex is actually a very common allergy. You probably get that question if you've ever gone into even just a dentist's office or any medical doctor's office where the doctor is wearing gloves, which I would hope most of them are. You get a question if you are allergic to latex. Well, actually, kind of a good test for that, not that you want to test it that way. If you get that itchy mouth that we talked about after eating an avocado or a banana or some of these other things also mentioned, there's a very good chance, especially the avocado, the kiwi, and the banana. If you have that oral allergy syndrome, there's a really good chance that you're also allergic to latex. So always, again, good to get that checked out with your doctor. And then the last one that we're going to talk about here is mold allergy. It's very common. Actually, yeast is really common too, and that's something that your doctor can tell you. But if you're allergic to mold, you want to avoid foods that are fungus because that's what mold is. So things like mushrooms, Sauerkraut can be a major issue. Dairy products, actually all processed meat and fish, anything that's fermented. I cannot drink any kind of alcoholic beverage for multiple reasons, which is a blessing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all, but that's related in part to I have a yeast allergy, a mold allergy, and so any little bit of that, and I start wheezing right away. So also dried fruits are known to have a lot of mold spores and things like that. And then there's those melons again. So again, just some things to be aware of. If you feel like you've been taking, allergy medications and you're still having issues, could it be that you're experiencing some of this oral allergy syndrome? I have also linked at the end here this Arizona sneeze. That I think that's adorable. That is the website for the allergy office that I go to. Here locally, they have multiple locations. One in downtown Phoenix, one on Camelback. I don't know all of the locations, but they are fantastic. So can't recommend them enough. And there's some other just links for you here. Don't forget to check out Exos at Home from your internal browser for all the programs and services that are available to you virtually. And please email me if you have any specific questions or if you would like to set up, a one-on-one to talk about your fitness, your nutrition, anything like that. Thank you once again. I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and I would love to answer any questions that anybody might have. Thank you.